September is actually the anniversary month, and 2020 marked the 250th anniversary of Universalism in America. On September 30th, 1770, Reverend John Murray preached for the first time on American soil in a little meeting house in the woods in Good Luck, New Jersey. Murray came to America to escape Calvinist England and find peace in a world after losing his wife and child to illness and being excommunicated from the church for his belief in Universalism. Over the next 100 years, Universalism gained extensive ground in America as the idea of hope from God's unending love and redemption for everyone spread. When John Murray washed ashore on the banks of Good Luck, New Jersey that September day in 1770, he did so with the idea that he would never speak to a crowd again. Like so many others of that time, after experiencing heartbreak and tragedy, Murray moved to America to start fresh. Preaching was not in his plan. Also not in his plan that day was a storm that caused the ship he was sailing in to make port in a small town just short of his New York destination. The captain of the ship he was on removed much of the cargo and many of the crew, putting them on a smaller vessel in hopes of reaching their destination more safely. He had left Murray in charge of the smaller vessel. When the winds became favorable enough for the larger ship to leave port, Murray's vessel was still too small to withstand the winds, and so they were forced to stay overnight. Despite his plan and the fact that he wasn't yet a minister when he unexpectedly landed in New Jersey, he was directed to a man by the name of Thomas Potter when he went inland to get rations for his crew. Upon meeting him, Potter knew there was something different about this man. Potter had different plans for Murray. Potter had an interesting story of his own. That story started and ended in the woods of Good Luck. He was born in Good Luck, and he left as a young man. Through his travels, he clung to the idea that if God would just get him safely back to his family home, he would have lived a full life and would finish his days in service. And because he made it back to those woods and was able to build a life of his choosing, he dedicated what was left of his life to loving and honoring God. While Potter was never really sure of what God was, he knew there had to be something greater than him and all that he had endured in his life to bring him safely back to his family home and provide him with a good life for the remainder of his days. After building a home and getting married, Potter built a meeting house. He was 71 years old when he built this meeting house, and rumor has it he built it because his wife Mary was tired of hosting all his strange religious conversations in her home. She wanted to not host these people and wanted a more formal place and for him to do his thing, which I thought was pretty funny, reading about his wife and her take on it. So Potter built a meeting house, or a church as we would call it, and anytime a person of faith came through Good Luck and wanted to preach, his meeting house was always open. The town folks, though, they taunted him a lot because he built a church without a preacher. They would ask him who was going to preach, and Potter would tell them that God was going to send him a preacher, and not just a preacher, but a preacher unlike any they had ever heard. Time passed. It would be 10 years before Murray washed ashore in Good Luck, but Potter persisted. And finally, one September day, a stranger came around asking for a fish to feed the people that had been stranded that afternoon on shore. Potter not only gave the man a fish, but he invited him back to his home to rest in a real bed for the night before embarking on the rest of his journey. You can read the rest of the story in the book, A Documentary History of Unitarian Universalism, Volume 1, or in John Murray's Records of the Life of Reverend John Murray. And while it is a fun story to read, and Murray played a major part in American Universalism, I think Potter is the true hero of this story. Murray struggled with going against his plans for the future. There are some great lessons for sure in how he made his decision to speak to those people in that meeting house in 1770. But Potter was the driving, loving force that believed. He believed not just in God, but in the purpose of his church. He believed in John Murray, and he believed in the message of Universalism before he ever knew what Universalism was. He too lived a life of struggle. He endured, and when he returned safely after so long with nothing but hope that he would someday return, he lived a life of love and service. He built a house for himself with his own hands. He married a woman and built a life with her in those woods. They tended to the ground and fished in the water, and they had everything they needed. But Potter felt called to more. He was so full of love and hope that he wanted to build more. He built a church at the age of 71. He built a meeting house. And he was approached by several faith traditions wanting to buy or use his house for their faith tradition, that they may convert the people of the area and recruit followers of their own faiths. But Potter refused. He stayed true to his doctrine of love, that all were welcome in his house. While Universalism gained much ground in its first century here in America, it did not become the religious superpower its founders thought that it would. At the same time, another heretical religion, that of Unitarianism, was gathering more and more followers as well. Both groups saw the ebb and flow of their movements, and in 1961, after much consideration, they merged to form what we know now today as the Unitarian Universalist Association. They worked together for many years before they formed the association, and there was an old clergy study group within the Universalist section of the association. It's the oldest known study group, called the Freighters of the Wayside Inn. They began meeting annually in 1903. They continued to practice traditions set forth by the original Freighters. Chief among these are sharing and discussing papers pertaining to a topic chosen by the prior, specifically related to Universalism. In January of 2020, my friend and minister of my home church in New London, Connecticut, Reverend Carolyn Paterno, served as prior to that year's annual meeting. Her topic was in recognition of the 250th anniversary of American Universalism. She asked 4 of her fellow Freighters to write in response to these questions. Universalism was founded as a saving faith. In these brutal times, what does 21st century Universalism offer us? How might it save us individually and as a country? And what balm or hope does it offer? The Mysteries of Love, 3 Eras of Universalism, was one response to her query by Reverend James Ishmael Ford. You can find his paper in its entirety on his blog. Reverend Ford concludes his paper with, C.S. Lewis called us to the 4 loves as used by the ancient Greeks. Agape, divine love. Eros, the loves of the body. Philios, friendship. And storge, empathy, or perhaps compassion. If one understands we are all woven of the same cloth, that our lives and our deaths are bound up in what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called a garment of destiny, then in the exact moment when we open ourselves full to this truth, well, then all 4 of those loves flow into and from us, and the great way of healing for us is revealed. A North Star appears, and we know what to do. With this body knowing, we can find the healing of our own divided hearts. And beyond that, we are given a moral compass that allows us to act in this world in ways that actually can help. All of it, it is the mystery and the power of Universalism. Reverend Ford reminds us of what Thomas Potter never forgot, and what modern Americans have a difficult time remembering. And that is, when love moves through and from us, we are able to heal. We are able to heal ourselves and each other. Reverend Paterno called it brutal times that we live in. I wonder, are the times that we live in now more brutal than the times of Thomas Potter? There is no doubt that our world is broken in many ways. We live in a country that generates more abundance than ever in human history, and yet we still face hunger and homelessness and poverty, disease, bigotry, and so much more. And in this past year of turmoil, we seem to have found new things to fuel our division. Indeed, the brutality is everywhere. Everywhere we turn, there is injustice and gross inequity. We as faith leaders are called to combat this brutality. And I think Reverend Paterno gave one answer to her own inquiry when she said, Universalism was founded as a saving faith. Having been a member of her church and having her mentor me and share her pulpit with me, I can tell you that she taught me that while her personal theology remains Christian, she holds space for a wide range of theologies that gather in that church every week. When we talk about universalism, we're talking more about the kind of faith that Thomas Potter carried with him. It's the kind of faith that has room for many ideas of what love looks like in the world. It's the kind of faith that has room for everyone and all the different ways of being that there are. It's the kind of faith that builds more, that serves others. And it's the kind of faith that offers comfort to the stranger and provides safe haven in the midst of a storm. It is a saving faith, especially for brutal times. As members of this faith tradition and as members of the human race, I would invite you in these brutal times to ponder what unconditional love looks like to you. I would invite you to sit with the idea of how it would look and what it would feel like if you let love move through and from you as you moved through this world. L.R. Nost said, "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in the darkness for the light that is you." It is my sincere belief that this message is what Universalism calls us to do, to allow love to move through and from us, to make choices every day in loving intention, that we might someday help heal our broken and beautiful world. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Oh, click that to remove spotlight. Okay. If you are okay with it, if anybody has questions or that evoked any thoughts from the folks here, we'd like to engage if that's okay. Yeah, it was good to hear the early history and how it relates to today's world. Anybody have anything they'd like to share or? Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
That was beautiful, Barbara. Thank you so much. We're dealing with a relationship now in the family that is causing some trauma and some drama. And I can only approach a resolution with unconditional love. I mean, it's just, it frees you of feeling you have to be this emotion or that emotion. And I'm just, time is important though too, because it takes time sometimes to work through everything that you need to work through to get to a better place. But thank you very much for those reminders. I'm going to keep that in my heart today and really think more about what we're going to need to do. Thanks.
I remember hearing this story a little bit way back when we first started at Dakota UU Church, and I was teaching RE, and there's a story about John Murray for the kids, and I really always liked it. But being reminded of it today, it had a new meaning to me because of the parallels that I feel like we have at our church, and that we thought we were going to be a different church. The time frame that we're on is different than what we thought. And yeah, but you just never know what's around the corner or what the next storm will blow in or whatever. And so it keeps me curious and interested and grateful for what we do have. And yeah, it was like Sue said, I really appreciate the message.
Well, I do have a closing piece of music. If we want to let your thoughts ruminate, and we can go from there. So I will share my screen, and hang on a second. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna do that in a second. Let me get the right thing called up here. This one. Okay, now I'll share my screen. One of my favorite old hymns.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all truth. Is our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of year
one piece of business. We appreciate anybody donating to our cause in the a collection plate, as it were, of PayPal online or on our website, or you can send Alice a check, and we appreciate that. We give and receive in gratitude.
I do
Anybody?
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Sure.
There is a church, I believe it's in Minneapolis, and it's the First Universalist Church. And I'm just curious if that's been their name for such a long time, they haven't changed it, or are they not completely a part of the Unitarian Universalist group? Denomination. I don't know if anyone knows the answers to that.
Yeah, they as far as I understand, both they and First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis are part of the UUA, and but they are both old enough to be, before the split. They go back to the early 20th century at least, and I think the First Universalist Church goes back to 1865 or something like that.
Okay. So they just haven't changed.
Right.
Okay. Just curious.
That's actually quite common in most of the areas that I've lived in. So I've been 3 different places in the Midwest and then 2 different places over on the East Coast. And what happened was Universalism took off for about 50 to 60 years. It really moved through the country. And then it started to fizzle as it rounded that first century. Like I had said, it didn't become the superpower that they had anticipated it being. And as it was fizzling out, Unitarianism was really coming into its own, and it became a huge, big thing for quite some time. And then it kind of fizzled out again, and that's when they kind of found each other and started working together. And your beliefs aren't so different than mine. And then that's when we hit the 20th century and kind of built that relationship that we have now. Or at least that's what they taught us in school.
Yeah.
Thank you. One thing I've observed, I've been a Unitarian Universalist since, well, when I was in high school, so it's been quite a while. And I remember during Vietnam, our little Costa Mesa congregation just grew exponentially. It just couldn't hold. We didn't have enough chairs to hold all the people. And it was mainly I'm surmising, but I think it was mainly because a lot of people didn't support the war, but they also needed to claim some religion that would get them, they could become conscientious objectors if they belonged to the church. So yeah,
I would say that, people join churches for their children. And I think we boomers, my family joined in 64, 65. And so, I think a lot of it, I mean, we had large RE classes. We had, a dozen kids in every church school, so I think some of it was that too, but yeah. Say, I had a thought, after Barbara finished, and of course, we're all kind of quiet because we're all kind of like tossing our thoughts around. This happens to me a lot in the church services, that I need some time to kind of get my thought together. And so my thought about loving is that sometimes it, unfortunately, is not very clear. I don't know if any of you have issues with anti-vaxxers in your family, and how is it love to tell them they can't come over until they get vaccinated? Or is it love to let them make that choice for themselves? And of course, you know, part of the reason we do all this is not for ourselves, but for our community and our other loved ones. So that's my question, you know. It's really tough sometimes to know what the love is.
It is really tough to sometimes to know what love is. And if I were sitting and spiritually companioning somebody who brought that question to me, my answer to you would be yes. It is loving both of those things. So I recently heard a new definition of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that we put up to keep people out. Boundaries is a container that we create to keep us whole and safe, to provide for ourselves. People are allowed to cross those boundaries and come into our energy and come into our space. But that boundary is what we hold for ourselves, right? So the loving thing for you to do for yourself and other people is, if you feel like that is not a safe space for you to allow somebody into your space that isn't vaccinated, then that is a loving thing for you to do for yourself. It doesn't have to be hateful. It doesn't have to be mean towards them. It can be, this is my comfort level and I have to take care of myself first, because if I don't, I can't take care of other people. And you can make that choice for yourself, because God gave you the same sovereignty, or source or universe or whoever gave you the same sovereignty that they gave me. And I acknowledge that that is your choice, and that I don't have to agree with it and I don't have to like it. And then you sit with that. And that's, I mean, because in the world that we're in, if we made space for ourselves and each other, would we have the divisiveness that we have? I'm not sure. And that would be my question.
Oh, sorry. That's great. I like that answer a lot. I just was queuing up a song that Kelly had requested, so we're still pretty early, so we can close with that. No surprise to most of you, but it's a Peter Mayer song. So, anybody else have some thoughts before I play the song? All right.
I thought of something, sorry.
Sure.
When you talked about the container, I really liked that. At the college this week, we started what we call, oh shoot, I forget, something about conversations. And it's dealing with learning about trauma and how to identify it, how to address it, not, instead of not ignoring it and not becoming so burnt out and traumatized ourselves from, and then get compassion fatigue when we are dealing with the trauma of our students and coworkers and everybody that we come in contact with. And then when you talked about, when you described the boundaries, I loved it, because this conversation group that we started on Friday is being facilitated by Dr. Ronald Bell, who is a minister, a local minister, and he's written a book called The Four Promises, and he talked about the container versus the content, which is you have to look at your container, which is your body, your brain, your heart, not just the stress that it's dealing with, and not just the trauma it's dealing with, but how is it affecting you? And if you just constantly ignore that, then that's when that compassion fatigue happens. And I'm also reading a book called Burnout, and it talks about similar things, only uses different words, that we not only have to deal with the stress, but we have to deal with the stressor effect that it has on our bodies. And we can't just push through and ignore it. We have to deal with that too. As Professor Vanderkolk says, the body keeps the score, and we'll remember all of that.
Thank you for that. I think it's really interesting how in our culture we have this idea that love means we let other people do whatever they want. And that's not what it means. And so I guess if you have a daily spiritual practice like a meditation or a quiet time that you take for yourself, that's one of the things that I really would invite you to do. And that was my intention with the call to action at the end of my talk, was that to sit with, what does unconditional love mean to you? What does it look like? How do you do that in the world? And how might your environment change if you lived from that place? So that would be my biggest thing that's in alignment with all of this conversation is, what does it really look like? And can you be loving and draw hard lines? And can you be loving and make space for yourself and others? Can you be loving and invite the sacred in and still maintain your boundaries? That is really, really my invitation to everybody this morning and in the world that we live in right now.
I think a lot about what's going on in our little Monday knit group. Some of you have visited us when we were meeting in person, and there's been some talk lately about trying to go back to meeting in person, but we used to meet at Panera, and one person in our group is, I guess you'd call her health chronic cancer. She's takes medicine every day that keeps her alive, but her health is precarious, but she functions quite well. And then there's another gal in our group who I like a lot, and she's very generous, and yet she's refuses to be vaccinated. She is very careful. She wears a mask, but somehow the idea of, I think, cognition, cognizant dissonance has come into my awareness, and it really, thinking about it, the world and people who disagree with me or who seem to function against their own best interest, it really helps me understand that for certain people to give in, they would have to change. Well, for certain people to get vaccinated, they would have to completely change their whole life philosophy and political affiliations, and they would have to admit they're living a lie, I guess, or anyway, they can't let it go. And it really helps me feel not, so many people are saying, if they don't want to get vaccinated, fine, just let them die. And to me, I mean, I'm hearing that a lot. And or let Darwin take over, or whatever. And because I know this person and I like her so much, she's fun to be with, and yet she's very she's very religious and very politically conservative, as is her whole family, her husband, and I think kids as well. And I just can't feel like I want to see her, let her go ahead and die, which might happen. But I think just thinking in terms of cognizant really helps me, and trying to change people's minds, it's just not possible. And so put your energy elsewhere, I guess. So anyway. I think
Yeah,
you're muted.
that's a tough one. All right. Well, Peter Mayer has this song that is very much Universalist in its outlook, and so I think I'll go ahead and play that for you. Give me one. Go down here. I'll show you the lyrics as soon as we get started here.
Jesus spoke, entreating them to live together in a great circle of love. And when his followers asked him then who should be included, Jesus said, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle. Oligarchs and tyrants try to keep some in and everyone else outside, till revolution sweeps across the land and the people all stand and the common folk cry, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle. Sometimes a circle is a class or creed. Sometimes a circle is made of only men. Until Susan B. Anthony says, what about me? Let me in, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle. Sometimes a circle is a privileged thing, excluding people for the color of their skin, until the voice of Martin Luther King says, let freedom ring, let them in, let everybody in, everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle. Gay and straight, rich and poor, whole and broken, open up that door. The more we are, the greater we become. After all, we all are one. Bring in the people, but don't stop there. Bring in the fish in the sea and the birds in the air. Bring in the rivers wide and the mountains tall. We go together, not at all. Let everybody in, everybody in, everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, 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 everybody into the circle, circle, everybody, everybody, everybody into